Okay, welcome to this last session. I'm presenting here on behalf of my colleagues, Sebastian Nordhoff and Mandana Seyfeddinipur, who are also here, and whom most of you will know. And the purpose of this talk is to introduce this project called Open Text Collections. I'll give you an overview of the project, and then I'll address our ideas and notions about what is a text collection in our sense, how we want to publish them. I'll talk about the workflow and data models, about the various output formats, and I'll address where we stand now. And last but not least, I'll show you how to proceed if you want to publish a text collection with us. Okay, so this is jumping a bit fast. So as a rough overview, this project started last year. It's funded through the German Research Foundation for a period of 3 years, so up until 2026. Our publication partner in this text collection project is Language Science Press, and Sebastian is a member of this, obviously of both. The project, what I'm talking about, Open Text Collections, is now a series within Language Science Press, just like you have all the other series. And that will continue even beyond the funding period, so well after 2026. So I mentioned that the 3 of us, and there's also 12 coordinators or editors for sort of 6 regions in the world. You see a few of them listed down. You see them listed down here. Not all regions in the world are represented. So we don't have a regional board for Australia, and we don't have a regional board for North America. Okay, but they can surely be established. So the goal of this project is to mobilize or to publish texts. Now, this is obviously a very old idea in language documentation and language description. It goes back at least as far as Franz Boas' notion or conception of a descriptive trilogy, where you have a grammatical description, a dictionary, and a text collection to make up a more or less complete description or snapshot of a particular language. And you see here the book covers of Jeffrey Heath's publications for the language called Ngubuyu, spoken in the top end of Australia. And indeed, most reference grammars, PhD grammars or published grammars nowadays have a couple of glossed texts in their appendices. So the text collections as we envision it are different from archive collections. So here is a quotation from Nick Evans and Alan Dench's book on catching language, where they describe the usual structure of a typical archive collection. And they compare it to the Russian doll or matryoshka principle. So they say there is a core of well-analyzed material that may not exceed greatly in quantity, is produced by traditional methods, and then you have an expanded set of roughly transcribed material, and then you have a huge amount of data that is not transcribed or translated at all. So to make this point a bit clearer, I'll look at my own archive collection for a language spoken in southern New Guinea called Komso, that is archived with the language archive. And you can see here that I estimate that there's roughly 60 hours of audio-visual recordings in there, but also photos or scans or materials of other types. And I estimate that within these 60 hours, there's roughly 50 hours of speech, people speaking. During the course of my work on this documentation project, I have segmented and glossed around 12 hours of this. So this is what I would call a text corpus within this. And now what we do for the Komso text collections in my particular case is to select a number of texts from these interlinearized texts and sort of curate and edit them. I'll talk in a minute about what this means, to publish them as a text collection. So you see things are nested. Okay, so the archive collection corresponds to the whole thing, and the text collection is just a smaller sub-part of this. There are a number of places or publication formats out there often tied to particular institutions and particular national backgrounds or to regions in the world that already do this, of course. They publish texts and we think they have a number of shortcomings. I don't really want to criticize them, but I'll just pick out one example. TIC-TILP, the texts in languages of the Pacific, so that's the region where I work. They publish text collections. At the moment, there are 3 or 4 text collections published there. They are free to download. They don't have license information, so it's a bit difficult if you want to use and continue to use those texts. And they're available in PDF format only, so that's difficult from a computational point of view. Okay, so I'll move on and talk a little bit about the definitional notions of what is a text collection in our sense. So I said that it's curated, so it's not just any amount of recordings that you have recorded and glossed and segmented and translated, but it's something that hangs together in a sort of thematic and topical sense. Often these come from a documentation project, but we have also had submissions by now from legacy data. During this 3-year funding project period, we focus on monologues. The texts in these collections should be edited. So the contributors or the linguists who wish to submit one, they may choose to edit out, or they actually should edit out basic things like false starts, pauses, self-corrections. As a consequence of this, it means that the text collections will not be naturalistic, and they will not be time-aligned with audio-visual footage. So they're not the same as an Elan transcription. And as a third, fairly simple definitional criterion, we want to publish interlinear glossed text. So text needs to be glossed and needs to follow, as far as this is possible, the Leipzig glossing rules to make things interoperable. We can also look at sort of normative criteria. How should text collections be? So what we wish for is that text collections should be contextualized. So it's not just a set of texts from some language, but they should be sort of enriched. They should be enriched with information about a speech community, about the language itself, about the recording methods, the ethics procedures. They can include information about the speakers, about narrative traditions. So this should be a sort of a context or an intro chapter to a text collections as we would like to publish them. Second, these text collections should be very clear and very transparent. In that sense, they should have good provenance about what has been done to the texts. So they should be linked to some sort of original recordings that are stored in some archive. And whatever decisions you make to change and edit these, I'll get into this in a minute, they should be documented and you should be explicit about this. These text collections should be accessible. I mentioned that we have as a publishing partner Language Science Press, and as all Language Science Press publications, they should be published as an open access CC BY following FAIR principles. And last but by no means least, they should of course be all ethical in the way they treat the material. So there should be involvement with the community that you're working with. And naturally, there should be consent. And so we should follow these care and fair principles that we've listened to or heard about earlier today. And yes, we are aware that both principles can come into conflict very often, and they should be well negotiated. Okay. I'll rush on next to the kind of workflow of what we do. So we basically accept submissions in various structured formats. You can see here Flex databases, Elan files. You can submit LaTeX documents or spreadsheets. I'll skip through this quickly because you all know what a Elan file glossed text looks like, or what a Flex database looks like. So we would import this into a file format that we use as a backend. The backend file format that we use is called cross-linguistic data format. Excuse me. And this file format has become a standard in larger projects in linguistic typology, for example, GramBank or Dictionaria. And it's basically a CSV, so a comma-separated file that sets up your lines in your interlinear gloss as tables, columns here. The point is that from this backend format, we can export into a variety of different output formats, you could say publishing formats. And I'll go through these quickly. So the first thing that we see here is just a screenshot of my own text collection, which is sort of a classic PDF book. You just see a table of contents here. What you see inside there, well, you probably don't see this, but the book contains a sort of introductory or contextualizing chapter. And it contains glossed examples in a standard way. We can also export from the same source as what we might call a community version of the text that in this case here shows the source language Conto on the left in columns and the translation language English on the right. And it's broken down in paragraphs here with a short metadata intro at the top. So that can also be exported. Now on to the more digital or more structured data sides of this of these output formats, we can output to HTML. So this is a screenshot of a model site that Sebastian has developed for a previous project that's called IMT Vault. And IMT Vault takes all the glossed examples from Language Science Press publications, and you have a sort of a HTML search window here. So what I did here, I searched for a term, for a English word return. I filtered for only Conto examples, and I said I only want to see examples with an ablative case marking in it. So you can filter things. And the idea is to have a HTML output for all these texts as well. Okay, I better rush. There will be other digital formats like JSON and the CSV too. So the idea behind this is that text collections, as we want to publish them, are basically two things. On the macro level, they are books. They have an author, they have an ISBN or a DOI. They can be printed on demand, but on a micro level, they are structured research data that can then be used further on. So currently, we have around 50 expressions of interest to tell you where we stand at the moment. I would say 22 of those are sort of in progress, and 4 of them are a manuscript has been submitted or is near to being submitted. Okay, I'll skip this. We can talk about this individually or later. It's just a list of how to publish with us and what to do. So what I do want to say is that this project addresses different needs. So we see text as I said, as a structured research data for various people, typologists, computational linguists, etc. But we also want to pay tribute to, and we also want to publish text as a whole set of narratives, as they've been often told to us as documenters. And this is also relevant for linguists. It's obviously relevant for speakers, but also for social scientists who are not linguists, like anthropologists. And we want, when we see text collections as a publication format, obviously all of us who are in a maybe early stage of career, we had this earlier today, we need to have peer-reviewed publications. And we've been working for years and years on these text collections. So if we publish them, it shouldn't be only published in an archive somewhere or in a repository, but it should also be as a book. Thank you. You can find us on our website, but obviously you can just talk to us here. Thank you.
Thank you. We have ample time for questions now. And we take a question at the back first.
And I'll just pass this on to questions that my colleagues can answer.
Thank you for this presentation. I wanted to ask you about the text that you mentioned that have audiovisual data linked to this. So I know that many communities find very valuable for their revitalization initiatives to access the recordings. And I was wondering if also in this initiative you are planning to match the text exactly with these audio formats, or you are only providing access to the raw ELAN files?
Neither. Neither and both, actually. So we do we do not provide access only to the ELAN files, but what we do is we publish the text really as a kind of written oral literature. It's a bit quirky, but yeah. And we also, ELA and ELDP offer for anybody to submit anything to open text collections to have the source material like recordings, video recordings or ELAN files to be archived with ELA. And then we will establish basically a pointer. So when I say it's not time-aligned, it's not, you can't click and it's not time-aligned in an ELAN sense, but it's linked, right? So that if a community or if anybody wants to look at the original data, either the original recording or the ELAN files that this is based on, they can just follow that track.
Thank you.
This is a comment and not a question, but I just wanted to observe something about the decision to focus on monologues, which is that monologues require a very different data model than dialogic or multi-party texts. And I would just be very anxious to be sure that the data model you're developing does not constrain you in the future from being able to publish multi-party texts, especially because of the emphasis in language documentation on recording material that is not exclusively narrative. I am worried that this will become a narrative-only format.
Yes. So thank you for the comment. Let me just reply to this on a very concrete and a very conceptual model, so a conceptual way. So very concrete, I would say yes, at the moment we cannot deal with dialogue at all in terms of the data model. That's difficult because you have overlaps, of course, and if you represent things in a table-like format in the back end, how is that going to work? On a more conceptual level, we have been thinking about this, and we would say anybody who is really studying language in the live conversation will not be interested in looking at a text collection in the first place.
That is really empirically false. I mean, like at the methodological conversation, analysts are like constantly looking at multi-party data in text format. I mean, the fact that we don't do that within language documentation is like a sociological question, but people absolutely study conversation based on textual data.
Yeah, and you would not say that this is also based, this is also caused by technology. So that conversational
the data that they work with is old.
Of course, no, I don't mean that. What I mean is that in the for conversation and analysts, a few, let's say, decades ago, it was simply not feasible and possible to have this kind of time-aligned ELAN view of something. So they prefer to work on textual data. Whereas I would say nowadays, if somebody starts to do research, well, not just conversation analysis, but also if you study these fluencies or any kind of that data, you'd rather look at a file, and listen to it.
We should talk later.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think it's a very good idea to have text edited and printed in 2 columns with the English translation and then the text in the original language, because we want to have our language documentations be usable for the community, yes, and for interdisciplinary research. And when I have now descriptions of how to build a house or cook a meal, then it's interesting for the indigenous people, for the contributors, to read the text, especially if they are forgetting their own language, and then they have the English version next to it, so they can learn their original language, or the anthropologist can read the English text first and think, that's not interesting for me, and goes on and reads the text, I want to understand this text. So, thank you.
Thank you.
So my earlier question was whether any of the co-authors would have to have comments on this topic. And while I grabbed the phone or the microphone, yes, this is another comment that beautifying or transmogrifying the text, because they're not texts, but because they're bloody audio to start with or video, and they don't exactly match what is a nice text collection, it runs the risk of separating the beautiful productions we do and the way and often the speakers themselves think better about the text, saying, oh, they look better that way. But we're separating them from what many people have taught us to look on as the real thing, which is language as communication between people that we capture through. But anyway, that's a big topic. And
the co-authors have a lot to say, I think.
Yes.
I think the key part to have in mind, I mean, Sebastian is probably also going to say, is that we need to mobilize the data in different ways for different audiences. The issue is that, we, like in the realm of, I'm the conversation person who worked on disfluencies, and when I see something edit the disfluency, it pains me. But if you look at my transcripts with disfluencies, no one can read them. You and I will read them, but nobody else. So I think mobilizing the materials that is hidden in an archive, in an ELAN file, in a structure that takes you years to find something in ELAR, let me just say that, this is one way of doing it, right? This is taking and doing a traditional way of mobilizing the data for a text collection in a very beautified way that a lot of people want to see, namely to show it's a language, it can be translated, it's printed, it's in a book. So it's valorizing everything in every level with the traditional formats. And I think that's one step. That doesn't mean that we don't want to have the conversational data be usable for the conversation analysts that look at turn taking or disfluency or repair management. Sebastian.
I'm concerned that there's so much to discuss, but that's what we're here for. We're already behind schedule, so we'll listen to Sebastian for a second and keep all our questions for the long exchange times that have been.
Yeah, I think, is this on? Yeah. So it's on. The main point is, I think, mobilization, what Mandana mentioned. So we have 70 hours of video in the archives and no one looks at them, right? And so I think if they start with a text collection and then they are lured into the archive and explore the archive more, that's, I think, in everybody's interest.